هوليوود في أمريكا، هوليوود في الهند، هوليوود في لبنان، وربما في معظم أنحاء العالم. لكننا لم نسمع عن هوليوود في العراق. ربما حان الوقت ليجي أن نسمع عن هوليوود in Iraq. اليوم نحن نشهد الورشة العالمية أو الدولية الخاصة بقصص النجاح العراقية وكيفية تحويلها إلى أعمال فنية ممكن للمشاهد العربي والعراقي والدولي أن يطلع عليها ويرى مدى التضحيات التي قدمت من قبل الجنود والأمهات والأخوات وحتى المدنيين والأطفال. Mr. Lowell, first of all, let's talk about what is the precise intention of you to bring all these characters together in this workshop.
Well, our goal was to bring some experienced Hollywood storytellers, directors and writers to meet with Iraqis from all different sectors in order to give them feedback, give the Iraqis feedback on their creative content, on their stories, in order to build relationships between Hollywood and Iraq, and hopefully to launch further cooperation that's going to help Iraqis tell their stories most effectively, both to audiences in Iraq, in the Middle East, and for the whole world to see and hear. AAM is an organization that I founded, and we partner with major media and creative community across the Middle East. In the first phase, we mostly focused on documentary production and public affairs programs, and we continue to do that, partnering with different hosts and channels in the region to co-produce documentaries and public affairs programs, all focused on what we call universal values. So focused on programming that's not just trying to make money, but programming that helps advance society and helps advance culture. Then we launched this Hollywood Middle East initiative that we've discussed already. So in response to the interest in greater storytelling capacity, we started leading these workshops and then hopefully launching co-productions of original Arab drama and entertainment. And obviously Iraq can be an important partner for this.
So you're the one who gathered everybody, or did you get help from other sides or other companies or something like that? Is the AAM the one who holds up everything?
On the American side, yes, AAM is the one that organized, brought everybody together. And then
How
of course,
you came up with this idea?
We have a larger initiative of this kind in the region, bringing Hollywood to the Middle East. Because we heard from many countries in the region that the greatest need is in better storytelling and script writing, and that many people in the Middle East, especially young people, they watch so many shows from the West, from the United States. They want to see their own shows. They want to see Arab shows that reflect their own culture, their own stories, and they want to see those shows on Netflix or Amazon. They want to see them around the world. They want them to be the best they can be. So we responded to that interest, to that demand, by bringing some of America's most experienced storytellers. Iraq, of course, has unique stories, unique challenges, and a unique hunger and appetite for this. We've seen that the last few days in the workshop, the stories have really poured out from our Iraqi friends here. Many of them, as you know, very emotional. Stories of heroism, stories of sacrifice, sad stories of suffering. These are stories that the world needs to hear because there are lessons for everyone to learn from it. And I think especially with Iraq's victory over Daesh, it's important for the world to hear the stories of heroism that have come from Iraq, and we see Iraqis want to tell those stories.
Does that mean that you were very, how can I say it, you have chosen the characters like quite well with accurate choices, or you have the mindset and you have chosen, like when you thought of making this workshop, you were thinking of the main characters that you will bring up to this workshop, like for example Mrs. Janet Batchelor, Bill Marcelli, Tim Clementi, and so those characters. Why did you choose those kind of characters? And at the same time, the Iraqi characters that they have presented the workshop as well.
We chose them because we wanted people from Hollywood who we thought had high-level experience working on major productions. Productions that people here might be familiar with. Janet Batchelor wrote one of the Batman movies, the one with Jim Carrey. I don't know if you saw that one.
100%.
So
the founder of Riddler.
There you go. So we wanted ones that have real experience and have worked on things that people are familiar with. Second, we want people who care, who believe in this cause, who believe in the importance of coming to Iraq. 2 of our 3 have never been here before. Who would believe in what we're trying to do, who will care about bringing Iraq's stories to a larger audience in the region and the world, as well as to Iraqis. And third, we wanted people who are good communicators, because you can make great movies. It doesn't mean that you know how to explain to other people how to make great movies.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Sometimes
precisely.
the best teachers are not necessarily the best doers. So it's very important to find people from Hollywood who both know how to do and teach. And these 3 are excellent at both.
And also, at the same time, one of the 3 characters, Mr. Tim Clementi, he is well familiar with the whole counterterrorism matter, because he's been specialized with this.
Tim served in Iraq. I mean,
Yeah.
Tim is amazing because he had, first of all, a career.
In 2007.
Yeah, he had a career in the FBI in the United States before he ever went to Hollywood.
Yeah.
He served in Iraq. He has wonderful Iraqi friends going back 10 years from his experience here, who he's been so happy to see again during this visit. So it's personal for him too. And it's amazing to have somebody who has that direct experience with counterterrorism, who then decided to go to Hollywood and start writing. So he writes on some of the biggest network television shows in the United States, NCIS, that deal with crime, that deal with counterterrorism. So Tim is obviously a perfect fit for this workshop, and it means a lot to him to come back to Iraq.
As I said before, you were quite familiar with an expert, actually, with the counterterrorism matter. And do you think, is this a big part of your participation in the workshop?
Absolutely, it is, because I've been to Iraq before. I've spent well over a year here. This is actually my 5th time in Iraq, and I understand what the people have suffered. I understand the messages and what they want the world to know about how they've suffered, and they've survived and excelled even despite all these circumstances. And I want them to understand that I'm only a storyteller, a writer, and a producer because of my background in terrorism, really. And so much of what I write and do in television and in movies relates to terrorism. When I was here the last time was in 2007, and I was here actually as a counter-IED investigator. So I was here to try and stop the IED attacks that were really ravaging, especially Baghdad at that time. And one of the things we were looking at was circumstances like in Northern Ireland in the 1970s, where there were a lot of IED attacks that were happening then. And so some of the chemicals that they used back then, we were trying to make sure were not going to come into Iraq. Early in the war in 2004 through 2006, most of the IEDs used old military weapons, artillery shells, mortar shells, and bombs, and then they improvised those to blow up on a street corner or wherever.
Yeah,
but later in the war, because most of those military supplies had run out, there was much more of a use of creating chemical explosives. And so that makes it more difficult because you have to prevent the precursor chemicals from coming here. But there was very diligent efforts by the Iraqis and American authorities and coalition forces to try and cut off some of those supplies so that the IEDs couldn't be easily made. But I know there were some brought in from other countries, snuck across the border, and that became a problem that then became border security too. So it's difficult with a large open border to stop things, as we know in the United States, where we have drugs, illegal immigrants coming in, terrorists, cartel members. So it happens everywhere in the world.
It is.
But thankfully, the Iraqis have been able to get a handle on that and reduce.
And contain the whole matter. How did you find these stories occurred during fighting Daesh? This hard period that Iraq went through at that time, defeating Daesh is not an easy thing. So many stories probably you have heard throughout this workshop. How did you find those stories?
I was very surprised. I was deeply moved. At one point, I feared that I was embarrassing myself because I began to weep at the table. Some of those stories were so powerful. The stories of heroism and bravery, martyrdom, the sacrifice is very moving, very, very powerful.
I've been deeply moved by the stories that I've seen, really overwhelmed at both the brutality and the evil of Daesh and the bravery of the people fighting and the resiliency of the Iraqi people continuing to live and stand up against such a horrible evil and such a terrible enemy.
They're compelling. They really pull at your heart because, as I said, the people in Iraq have suffered so much, but they never stop. They never give up. I mentioned at a dinner last night that in America we've been attacked. We've had terrorist attacks. But when there's a terrorist attack, it shuts things down in that region for a long time. Yeah. After September 11th, 2001, most people weren't traveling. Air travel was greatly reduced for a long time. We literally shut down all the airliners for weeks. In Iraq, a bombing happens, people are killed, and within hours, people are back at that location saying to the terrorists, "You have not won." And it's an amazing thing to see. The strength and resilience to keep fighting and to keep living your life despite the threats, the attacks, and even the carnage that happens right around people. They go right back to their lives because they do not want the terrorists to win.
Stories like that are true, they're deeply powerful, and they rival the best Hollywood films that you could see. I mean, a story like that's amazing.
So those stories, do you think that, probably you think that they are worthy to turn into movies, but what is the chance of making movies throughout of these stories?
Well, one of the things that I have found watching these very short films over the past few days is how many of them are telling a very rich story in a very small amount of time. And some of those stories, I think, could very easily be a 1 hour, 2 hour story. Stories that involve the rescue of dozens of families.
Beneath the remnants, the infrastructure was terribly destructive. So,
yes, there was one story of a media crew that was filming a village that had been bombed by ISIS, and they found a family still alive in the rubble.
Yeah.
I believe that the story was called Mariam.
Yeah, precisely.
And the young girl named Mariam was buried in the rubble with her family.
Yeah.
And the news crew was desperately trying to pull them from the rubble while ISIS was coming to attack them.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And then at one point ISIS does arrive, and they were shooting grenades at them and small arms fire.
Yeah.
So the media crew broke into two groups. Some went to the front of the building to try to distract ISIS, while at the back of the building they were desperately trying to save them. And the little girl's father was still trapped inside.
Yeah. What do you think of the drama works that you have witnessed throughout the work?
We've seen so many of them we've only seen 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
We haven't seen the whole thing, but there certainly have been stories that have pulled at my heart and made me wonder what happens next. And that's always a good sign for a story. So there are certainly some that I think, you know, even some very short films that I think people around the world would love to see.
I believe that there are stories that can come out of this process that have the potential to be successful internationally. At the same time, we also don't want everyone to leave saying, oh, we've got now 10 major Hollywood movies coming out of one 3-day workshop, right? Because that's not the way it works in Hollywood or in Iraq.
You don't want to go too much high hopes.
Right,
yeah.
and you have to be realistic too. There are many Americans that all want to have their stories made into movies. The percentage of ideas that become movies, major movies, is not high anywhere. Yeah. So we have to be realistic. However, the answer to your question is absolutely. There are stories here, and my colleagues from Hollywood will tell you, that have universal messages, potential for universal appeal, and especially with the world thinking about now Iraq's victory over Daesh, which was a victory not just for Iraq, but for the whole world.
For the whole world,
It has potential. So yes, there is potential. Yes, there are stories that could succeed. Because we all need to understand that it's not a simple process. Where
especially this victory happened and achieved by their own will, by the Iraqis' own will, like with the help of many other sides, but still Iraqis, like the majorities for Iraqis who fought those terrorism groups.
Well, I think most people aren't aware of how many stories and what kind of emotional stories there are here. Because, you know, when you're a long distance away from a conflict, you hear about it on the news for a couple of minutes, you might read a newspaper article, you know there's a war that's going on, but you don't know the details, right? And so only when you come here and you hear, as we have heard the last couple of days, that the quantity of stories, of moving stories, it's emotionally overwhelming for outsiders to come here and to hear this. So I think, first of all, people on the outside don't know the details. But I think they will be extremely interested to learn more, because everybody understands that the fight against Daesh is a fight against evil. It's a fight for the whole world's security. And second, stories that we've heard of unbelievable bravery, self-sacrifice, heroism, love. I mean, these are themes that all human beings can understand and connect with. So I think people are not familiar with these stories in detail, but they'll be very interested to hear them.
قال الخبراء أن الأفلام التي هي من صناعة أمريكية أو ربما أجنبية وأيضا بأداء ممثلين أجانب أو أمريكان لن تنقل الواقع على أحقيته ولن تعطي الأحداث التي حدثت في العراق على حقيقتها. إذن يجب أن تكون البطولة، الأداء وصناعة الفيلم عراقية.
I have noticed that you have talked about that the Iraqis want to see their own stories on TV, on Netflix, on websites and everything, in the movie in English language or any other foreign language. So what I want to focus on here is that, does that mean that the actual actors and the movie makers is going to be of Iraqi ID?
Our whole purpose in coming here is not to tell more American stories or to just have American actors and American directors. The whole purpose is to support Iraqis and the Iraqi creative community so that they can tell their stories, so they can produce them, direct them, act in them. Our goal is just to support, to amplify, to strengthen their voices so that they can tell these stories in the best way possible. So the answer to your question is yes, that's our goal.
I think there were a lot of people early in the war that resented the fact that it didn't seem like the Iraqi forces were fighting, that only the coalition from other countries were coming in and fighting, but that wasn't real. And the reason they thought that was because when you're back in the United States watching American news, you'll see the stories of American soldiers that were killed in battle.
Even the movies that have been made that were about American soldiers.
Yeah, and you don't see the fact that more Iraqis are dying than Americans or than British or Australians or anyone else. They just, that information doesn't get there. But when they can learn about the heroism and learn what the Iraqi forces were able to do on their own and working with others, I think that most people will recognize that they didn't know what was going on. They'll recognize that they were ignorant. And so I think a lot of the dialogue about Iraq was that nothing was happening and without us there nothing happens. But now you learn in 2016, 2017, the Battle of Mosul, retaking Fallujah a few years ago, retaking Ramadi, that was all the Iraqis.
Yeah, recapturing the whole areas of Iraqi efforts.
And never giving up.
I believe that the stories, not only do they deserve to be told, but they deserve to be told by Iraqis. They deserve to be Iraqi directors, Iraqi actors, Iraqi writers. I believe it would be a mistake for Hollywood to hear that story and take it away and do it themselves. Sometimes Hollywood does that, but more and more now there is
a secret writer, you know better.
Well, yes, and in fact, some of the filmmakers here have asked me if I would be willing to work with them. So I may well end up collaborating with some of the people I've met this weekend. That remains to be seen. But if I were to do that, I would be serving an Iraqi story, an Iraqi filmmaker. I would not want to take it over and make it American or you know, something like that.
It had been originated as an Iraqi because it was born here in this.
Yes, and it belongs here. It is one of the things that that I found myself saying on my first day here, when I heard testimonies from many of the people at the table, some of whom are themselves Iraqi heroes, soldiers who have lost limbs, saving displaced people. Iraq is rich with stories, richer than gold. The stories of bravery and of people who have faced real danger is so amazing, and there are so many of these stories that I think they are best told by Iraqis. Iraqis should tell their own stories to the world.
You have to have Iraqi writers, but the American writers can be there to help support them, to provide the experience that they have from Hollywood in how to take stories and make them as effective as possible, as compelling as possible. But it still has to be Iraqis in the front.
Clearly the artistry of some of the filmmakers, you have the capability and the talent. Technically, it's become much less expensive to make movies now because the technology, I can use my cell phone and have the same quality image that you can get with a movie camera.
Yeah.
And so that capability now
So
brings
it's
it to the
about the
world.
vision rather than it's about a tool.
Yes, so the tools used to be prohibitive. Getting a movie camera was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now it's a couple of $100. You can have a camera that will do those high-speed images, very high quality, high definition. And so anybody can do it. It's what's in your eye.
Yeah.
So you look at some of the cinematography that we've seen in here, the use of filters and the use of light. It's brilliant. And so it's not something that Hollywood has to teach the Iraqis how to do. The Iraqis are doing it, and they just need to do it to a bigger audience.
Yeah, so the audience is needed rather than the experience and the tool.
Yes.
We have a lot of young men that have produced like short films and short movies about the stories that happened in Iraq. So do you think that there's a chance for these young spirits, young eager minds to make those movies explode abroad?
I think there is that chance, yes. One never knows which individual story will take off worldwide. If I knew that, I would be a very rich man, because I would do it myself.
Yeah, precisely.
It is always a gamble or a surprise.
عدة أفلام عرضت على خبراء كتابة النص السينمائي والإخراج والإنتاج، لكنهم تأثروا بها وقالوا أنها ربما حتى تتحدى وتجابه قصص هوليوود بحد ذاتها.
Stories like that are true, they're deeply powerful, and they rival the best Hollywood films that you could see. I mean, a story like that's amazing.
So it would be a challenge for other big movies as well?
A story like that of Mariam, or many of the others that I heard today, could easily become the basis of a longer film. Something I confess to you as someone from Hollywood, the danger is that a Hollywood studio might see that story and say, oh, that's wonderful, we would love to make that, but let's make the film crew Americans.
Yeah.
And I think that would be terribly wrong.
Well, producing very large movies is always very, very difficult. And even with the most talented people in the world, there's still an element of luck to see whether or not it works.
Yeah.
Everything can look perfect, and you still don't know, is it going to work? I think there's an enormous amount of talent here. The resources are what matter as well. To make a big movie that gets big box office often requires many, many millions of dollars of resources. And that I think is the next question to approach.
Yeah.
Where are the resources
Yeah.
to make these movies? If the resources are available, I feel confident that the talent will be available to make them happen.
So you are having the workshop right now. So this workshop might be an opening, a gate, a door for those young filmmakers and movie makers to open up to the abroad world and show their work.
I hope so. And in fact, we have already begun speaking about this. Mr. Jayashi and Syed, we met last night.
Yeah.
And we have begun preliminary talks about creating a film festival that will show Iraqi films to the world, not just here in Iraq.
Short movies and full movies on the same time.
Perhaps so. Right now, I have only been seeing short films.
Yeah.
But it may well be that there are longer form films as well that would be seen in such a
because there
festival.
are movie makers who started to make movies in English language. There's this movie called Suicide Vest. It's a full movie, 1 hour and 20 minutes. Actually, and it talks about the updates that happens in Iraq, like a suicide, how can come up with this idea of committing a suicide and kill people and all of a sudden quit it.
I absolutely believe so, particularly the story that you just mentioned, for example, because in Western culture, one of the things that truly baffles Westerners is what would lead a young man or a young woman sometimes to come from another country, to leave his family, to leave her religion, to come because of something they saw on Facebook that ISIS has posted. And they abandon everything and they come here to put on a vest and kill themselves.
Yeah.
So a full-length, a feature film, an hour and a half or so, that explores that with someone who actually did that, but survived, and can tell us why he did that and what made him change his mind, I think that would be a very powerful movie. And I think people around the world, not just in America, are eager to know what makes someone do that.
نشاهد الأبطال في الأفلام ونشاهدهم في بعض القصص الخيالية. اليوم يقول الخبراء أن هؤلاء الأبطال هم موجودون حقيقياً، وقد كانوا موجودين فعلاً في الأحداث التي حصلت مؤخراً في العراق، والذين بسواعدهم وبتضحياتهم قضوا على داعش والفكر الداعشي أيضاً.
Oh, some of the stories were very, very moving. We saw one story of a man bringing medicine to a family who was killed, trying to help a family only 12 days after he had been married. It tore my heart out to see that story. Stories of Daesh in the north of Iraq targeting Christians and writing the letter N on their houses. And the Iraqis who came in and wrote the word Iraqi using that letter to say, you are one of us. These stories moved me so much. I think that the children of Iraq are fortunate to be able to look at actual people and say, there are heroes who walk the streets with us. That's not something that we have the opportunity to say very often in the United States.
Our own marvels.
Yes, yes.
The characters are very powerful. And seeing some of these people, there was a video, I don't know if you saw it on, I think it was the first day, about Hussein, a young officer that was in Mosul, and there was an older man that Hussein went to bring medicine to, and that older man had all these other neighbors and people in his home that he was helping. And so the powerful story of Hussein and the gentleman who was helping other people, he was a civilian, bringing people into his home, taking care of the sick and the wounded. This young Hussein, a young soldier who had just been married 10 days before, comes to this man's home, brings him oranges because he felt bad visiting and bringing him only medicine.
So such a story.
It's an incredible story, and the emotion of it, having this man talk about Hussein who was killed, he was a hero, but he was a human being. And the man is a human being and a hero. He's helping all these other people. So that's an incredible story that you can't set that in the United States. You couldn't set that anywhere else because it only happened here because of the horror and the terror of ISIS. So if you remove the Iraqi part of it, you're removing what makes it
the essence.
Humane, because here you have these horrible terrorists doing terrible, inhumane things to people, and a victim of that isn't acting like a victim, he's acting like a hero to those around him. And then another hero comes into his life and acts like a hero. And it only happens because of the horror around them.
Have you find any results of such ideas applied in the workshop?
Obviously, we want it to be not just one workshop, we want it to be the beginning of many workshops. But I can tell you already, the stories that we're hearing are unbelievable stories.
Yeah.
They're stories that you and many people you know in Iraq are well accustomed to hearing. You know these stories.
Yeah.
They're unbelievable stories. And so there is, I believe, absolutely potential to try to advance some of these stories. It doesn't happen with a snap of the finger. It doesn't happen overnight. There's a process that takes to build the capacity, to take these stories to a larger audience.
إذن لا يختلف خبراء العالم على أن القصص العراقية هي أقوى القصص في صناعة الأفلام وأعمقها إيثاراً. لذا نتمنى بعد انتهاء هكذا ورشة ووجود هوليوود الآن في العراق أن يتم ترجمة تلك القصص إلى أعمال فنية عالمية تجعل العالم يطل على قصص العراق وشجاعة أبطالهم وقواتهم الأمنية، وفي ذات الوقت مدى عمق جراحهم. شكرا لكم لحسن المتابعة، إلى اللقاء.